can you start something that's really hard and just start for 5 minutes? Like start there. And maybe that's all you hold yourself to is like, let me start with just, I'm just going to set a timer. I'm going to start this hard thing. When 5 minutes goes off, if I still want to do it, I'll keep going. If I don't, I'll stop.
Welcome to Get Scene Unscripted. I'm your host, Jesse Malinowski. We are going to dive into acting insights, meet industry pros, and master the business. Don't forget to subscribe and share. We're keeping you behind the scenes and ahead of the game. Hey everyone, welcome back to Get Scene Unscripted. So glad that you're here, whether this is your first time tuning in or coming back for another episode. We appreciate you and I thank you so much. And I also want to give a shout out to everybody that has been leaving us a review or commenting on YouTube. Really appreciate it. And it just really means a lot to me and the whole team that this endeavor, this podcast, this platform to help move you forward in your actor journey is really helping you. So if you haven't done it already, please subscribe and let us know how the podcast is really influencing you and motivating and inspiring you. And we have a review that I want to share with you from Mr. Will Ford Jr. He said, what valuable insight into industry professionals and their advice and tips on how to succeed. You can't find this access anywhere else. Thank you, Will. And with that is another industry pro, everyone. We got Mr. Bajo Sonubi in the house. What's up, Bajo? How you feeling, man?
How's it going, Jesse? Oh, man, life is lifing, and I'm just along for the ride.
Life is lifing. I like it. I like it. I mean, you've done so many different things in the industry, from teaching to directing to acting to being a casting director. You've really done a lot, but I know, and knowing you pretty well, that your ultimate dream is producing and directing. And so I'd love to know how you've jumped in this really like creative life, right? And doing a lot of different things, how that's helping shape and move you forward into the ultimate goal.
Man, that's a big question. I'll do my best to answer it. Here's the short answer is like, I don't know yet. And that's the interesting thing about the way that I do life. One of the things that drives me is sometimes I would call it a willingness to fail. And by that, I mean a willingness to learn. One of the things that pushes me forward in life a lot, right, is trying something. And even if I don't succeed at it, whatever measure of success that people use, and usually it's sometimes in monetary terms, I always take away a lesson from whatever it is, no matter what it happens. And so the best way to describe it is that part of the reason I've been on this journey is ultimately just learning what's that next step or what's that next tool that I'm going to need to ultimately get me where I need to be. I started as an actor, and well, that's not entirely true. I should say that I started out with designs of becoming a lawyer first, right?
Practically the same thing.
No, seriously, yeah, no. Specifically a human rights lawyer. My undergrad was in international affairs, and that was my plan. There's a whole journey that eventually led me straight to acting, but the short version of it is I realized that I was advised that I would have better courtroom presence if I just took some theater classes.
Really?
And so, yeah. And so, of course, I ended up doing that. And I just ended up making that a major
and
as
then
well.
You never left, yeah.
But so the thing is, as soon as I graduated, my plan was to head straight to law school. But instead, I suffered what the kids know as a quarter-life crisis. And I was like, oh, do I really want to do law for the rest of my life? And I had so many undergrad professors go, you're pretty decent at this thing. Man, I'd love for you to it'd be cool if you would just go even further in it. So being a Nigerian, the son of Nigerian immigrants, I'm kind of first gen. I was born in Nigeria, but I've spent most of my life here. I was like, well, I still want to be a creative, so why don't I just go get an MFA? At least I can make it respectable, in terms of how I'm doing. So instead of going to law school for 3 years, I ended up going to grad school, for 3 years and get an MFA from SMU. Shout out to Mustangs. It's a fantastic program. I really enjoyed it. I had some amazing professors there, but part of that journey there was honestly figuring out that as much as I enjoyed acting, I enjoyed a lot of the stuff behind the scenes. And I had always done that, even in undergrad, as well. And so acting was just always a way in towards hopefully becoming a creator, at some point. And so when I fell into casting, and I can share a little bit of that too. But basically, I got a very amazing woman who decided to bring me on. Her name is Marty Tarek. She's a casting director here in the South, been working for a very long time on some like big projects and things like that. She brought me on as an assistant, and that's what started my casting journey. And then I got to work on some really amazing projects, and I felt like I got another MFA because I learned by going to almost every department and just soaking up information about how props was run, how set deck was done, how they did costumes, that kind of thing. And so it just kind of put me in this very unique position, to learn as much as I could about how the industry works. And the teaching aspect of it is that one thing that I've learned is that when I feel most confident that I know something well enough when I'm able to teach it. That's how I know that,
oh my
that
gosh,
I've got it.
I
And so
cannot
that's-
agree more. As soon as I learn something, whether it be from an event or a mentor or some guru of something, and I'm like, I really like this, I immediately think, let me go teach it to someone else because it just enters your body differently.
Yeah, 100%. And the thing that I figured out is when I fail at teaching something, I realize, I must not know it as well as I think I do. It's sort of a benchmark. So I kind of use it as a benchmark of how well I know something. It's not just theoretical for me. It has to be. I have to be able to practically execute it. And just don't get me wrong. I think there is a type of learning that can stay theoretical, and it helps inspire people who want to do the practical thing. I'm just not that kind of teacher, if that makes sense. It's like I get scared when I have to teach something that I don't know. And so unless it's one of these things I realized that I am best at, because I've tried it. I tried to teach things that I didn't know well enough, and then I would notice how I'd falter, either through a lack of confidence or just call it whatever you want. But the fact that I knew that I was nervous about imparting this onto someone else or sharing what my experience was like, I was like, I don't think you've either done this well enough or you're not confident enough in the experience that you have to pass it on or share it with somebody else.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered your question.
Well,
but
I mean, we can go in so many different directions now, which I love. You talked about like going to school and then when you were assisting Marty, that there was that like almost another MFA. Like, what do you think about the like going to school and getting an education as opposed to just doing? And the comparison in that?
I'm biased. So I think they're both equally valid ways. If I'm being honest, I love people who have training from school, especially if they took their training seriously. They're people who go to school and they kind of phone it in, and so they don't really get anything. Like they get the degree, but they come out and you can tell that nothing really stuck. And, they were just coasting, which is, again, that's fine because part of our society is like, you got to check this box called a college degree, or at least you used to, so that's okay. But the most valuable way to learn from me is to do. There's no other way to do it. Like one of the things that I love saying to people is, you want to know why many people aren't great? It's because being great is boring. Being great requires like doing the same thing over and over again until you get good at it. Period. Like that's the only. And the thing is, like, most people just want all the excitement and all the stuff that comes with greatness, but they don't. The work it takes, honestly, the consistency that it takes is so boring that people just end up being average instead of great. And that's what I've been learning. And so, to answer your question, is like I found learning on the job. If you have the stomach for it, the stamina, the quick mind, and the way to keep up with it, is one of the best ways and the quickest ways to learn. Because the stakes are just so much higher, and if you can handle that, then it works. If you can't, if you know that you need a safer space to fail where the stakes are lower, but you're willing to put in the same amount of effort as if the stakes were real, then I think equally you get just as good. So that's sort of my opinion on that.
Here at Get Scene Studios, I believe we really specialize in helping actors get agents. And so my favorite challenge is coming up, everyone. And for a limited time, you could get this 6-workshop series that's live for only $28. It's our Get an Agent Challenge, everyone. It's 2 weeks, 6 workshops, all live online. Now, if you miss anything, don't even worry about it because everything is recorded. But what this 6-part series really focuses on is gives you every tool and tactic you need to get an agent. And we're all together holding one another accountable to make sure you do the homework, you do what's needed so you can get an agent. Everyone, I love this challenge so much because people that have been looking for agents for 2 years get them in 2 weeks. It is unbelievable. So again, everyone, for a limited time, it is only $28. So grab your spot right now. You'll see the link in the pinned comments below. I cannot wait to see you there. Grab your spot for our Get an Agent Challenge. Yeah, there's these 3 phases of achieving your goals. And the first phase is like the excitement phase. Hey, I have this idea. I'm going to go do this, right? And then the middle phase is the mundane phase of and you got to push through and all that. And I'm like, that's exactly what you're saying with to be great is boring.
Incredible.
That's the mundane part.
Right.
And it's like also 3 phases to your achieving your goals, but also 3 phases to becoming great, I feel like. It's like, yeah, you go to that mundane phase, the boring phase, the just got to keep doing this to be great and to get where I want to go. And that's where so many people stop. They're like, well, this sucks. This is boring. Why do I want to do this?
Right. And the thing is, I don't mean to call it the boring phase, but it feels that way. It's because I think a lot of us get focused on results, and it's not our fault. We have a society that really pushes end product, end result as a thing. And the sad thing is that if ultimately process is really key to a lot of things, but we live in a society that needs metrics, for a lot of things, which is why the focus is so much on, well, what's the end product? What's the end product? When it's like process is really the key to everything. And so it's less boring when you go, you know what? Detach yourself a minute from the result. What does it feel like moment to moment to do this thing? Part of the reason it feels boring is because you're so focused on the end result that you're like, man, if I just get there, it's like, but how do I get from this thing to like the great thing? It's like, well, if you just stay in the moment and do the thing, it's actually not boring. You find the excitement, whatever that means, but I mean, the motivation comes through doing. It's not the other way around.
Yes.
And
yeah, you get that momentum.
Right.
And it feels good when you accomplish those small goals.
Yes.
We have a mentorship program, and the amount of people that come in with no agent, no credits, and their goal is, I want to be a series regular this year. And I'm like, that's all well and fine, right? But you're looking at a goal that's so far away that there's so many steps that we need to focus on in the beginning that if you don't focus on them, every single month, week, maybe year, you're going to be like, again, I didn't get my goal. Again, I didn't get my goal. Again, I didn't get my goal. You have to reshift those things and make that boring, mundane phase, if you will. Actually, we can make it exciting.
Right. Because I think the thing you're hinting at is that that's a goal you actually have control over.
Yes, exactly.
It's something that you can actually do. And, I listen, I get it. Everyone... we're all trying to make a living, we're all trying to live, and that takes money, and so everyone's kind of focused like, man, how can I do this and still, sort of make money? And, I don't know if there's I don't have a bullet, solution to that. All I know is part of the process is figuring out how to do that. How do you let yourself live, but live well enough that you can still continue to develop yourself in the way that you want to develop yourself? That is a skill we just have to develop and we have to learn. And, I'm speaking very frankly in opening. I cannot advise anyone how to do it because I'm still trying to figure out how to do it for myself as well,
yeah.
And so, when I land on something that I know 100% works, I'll be happy to come back and share it. But for right now, all I can say is that part of the process is figuring that out. And I found that to a certain extent, aspects of that are very unique. There's some people who could do a 9 to 5 and still do this. One of my favorite writers, I only remember the book. Her name is Suzanne. I can't remember her last name, but she wrote this book called Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. And when I heard the story of how she wrote this, I don't remember exactly how old she was, but she worked at a job that was very mundane, 9 to 5. She had kids, husband, all this other stuff. But she dedicated herself like from like 6 to like 9 or something every morning before she had to like start doing. It was like 4 to 7 or something before the kids woke up, and she had to, that was her creative time. And like for every year, consistently, she just wrote those. By the time she was done, she had this tome of a book that is, it's like almost 1,000 pages. It's a really good book. There's a Netflix series called that's really good too as well. It's kind of like a grown-up Harry Potter. The reason why I was amazed by this woman is just that she knew what she wanted. She found a way to like keep her job, but then still have this creative thing. And I don't know exactly what she's doing now, but I know she's written subsequent books. But the point is, she created a path for herself, right? And that worked for her. I don't know if I could do what she does.
Right.
I don't know if I could do that,
there-
but I need to find my version of that.
Yes.
Right?
I'm like, there is like a next level form of dedication and perseverance, like in that of like just continuing to maybe do some of the things that I don't want to be doing, but still focus on the things that I do. And you said, I mean, like years, because you said the book was so large, and it's like, yeah, I agree. Like, I don't know that I could do that either.
And
I
I
agree.
don't know if I'll have to go back. I know it took her, definitely took her some years to do it, but the thing that was important, right, is that she showed up every day and did it. And guess what? Each day she added a page or 2 or 3 or 10. And so by the time she was done, she had a book, and that's what it takes. And that's what I mean about like the boring part. If you're okay with, okay, can I do a page today? Like, there's no secret to any of this. Like, we just need to find what works for us, but there's no secret to it. You do a little bit each day, do a little bit more than you did yesterday. And by the time you're done, you really will have something, but you have to start with the doing first.
Yeah.
And that I think can be very hard, can be very challenging, especially if your goal is very unrealistic and it's beyond your control. So make it really simple. Can you start something that's really hard and just start for 5 minutes? Like, start there. And maybe that's all you hold yourself to is like, let me start with just, I'm just going to set a timer. I'm going to start this hard thing. When 5 minutes goes off, if I still want to do it, I'll keep going. If I don't, I'll stop. Like, it could be that simple.
I forget there's a statistic. I feel like I'm totally going to botch it, but the statistic is something like if you work on something for like 25 minutes a week, in 1 year, you will be in the top 1% because most people just don't stick with anything. And so if you do it each week for that amount of time, you have X amount of hours, whatever that ends up being, right? It's over like, I don't know. I'm not going to make up the math right now.
Well, we'll have to find out where that source is, because I'm
but like you become like in the top 1%. Like literally, if you just do that, and it's like that seems like such a small number to do just consistently, but consistency is the.
I told you that's the key. That's the boring part. It requires consistency, and the thing is, I don't want people to blame themselves, because I'm very aware of the modern conditions that make it very challenging to be consistent. Look, there were a bunch of structures in society that made it easier for us to do a lot of things, but some of those things have honestly fallen away, whether it's the church, whether it's what do you call social clubs, whether it's like all these things that were sort of built into society to help make you accountable, and so you didn't have to work as hard. Some of those things are gone now, because for good or ill, America, I think, is hyper individualistic. And that's the other thing that people miss about the challenges of the world. Like, so much of what we do, let me put it this way, because I'm someone who believes in radical self-responsibility. I believe that you should own as much as you can. But having radical responsibility, right, includes understanding the things that you do not have control over and they're not your fault, and being able to release that part of it. Does that make sense? That's what I mean by radical self-responsibility. Being able to really truly understand, okay, even if something goes wrong, you can own it, but own the parts that belong to you, and the parts that you kind of had nothing to do. You had nothing to do with it, right? Does that make sense?
1,000,000%. And the amount of things that people probably hold on to that are completely out of their control, and they let that hold them back, pause them, put them in a rut, get them stuck, like that number's got to be unbelievable.
And to tie it back to what you were saying about the consistency and doing that thing, like you said in your mentoring program, people come in and say, I want to book a guest star. Do you realize what you just set yourself up to do? Like,
I say it all the time, yeah.
You have set yourself up to essentially fail, because the only way that happens, and I'm just being very kind when I say this, is luck. If it does happen, if that was your goal and that happened, I promise you it's luck, because people do not think about the amount of luck that goes into these kinds of things. But if you start with, I'm going to do this, consistency, all this, even if the thing doesn't happen, right? here's what you know you can own. I woke up every day, and for 25 minutes I did this, and no one can take that away from you.
Yes. So
And
huge.
and it's up to you what meaning you want to attach to that. I attach meaning to effort that I've spent in things, even if the result is not what I hope. Even if the result is not what I hope, right? The one thing that can never be taken away from me is like, you know what? Here's what I actually did learn. Because I don't believe in mistakes. I believe in learning. And the reason, if you feel like a bunch of mistakes keep happening, it's because you're not taking time to digest the lessons from each mistake that keeps happening.
Yes.
And that's the only way that I can put it, you know? And I want to be very careful when I say this too, because when I talk about radical self-responsibility, it also means being responsible enough to know that there are things that you cannot do by yourself. And so who do you surround yourself with to help keep you accountable? That's also taking radical responsibility. Building a community is also part of radical self-responsibility.
Have to have it.
Right.
It's so often, it's like, you think about like, what is it that I need to do? What is it? What is it? Sometimes it's not the what, it's the who.
Exactly.
It's the who.
Exactly. And especially when we're talking about film, I don't think people truly understand how highly collaborative this industry is. It's one of the strengths and the weaknesses of it. On the one hand, it's impossible to make a film by yourself. I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen. All right?
Or it's not going to be that
It's
good.
not. It's definitely not going to be. It's impossible. So you have to have people. And so part of your work is learning what are you good enough at, right? That you know you could always bring to the table, and then finding the other people to fill in the parts that you know you're not good at, and being humble enough, right, to work with those people and go, okay, hey, I will do my part. I'm going to trust that you're going to do your part, and then hopefully we'll make something beautiful, right? It's the reason why the industry can be very insular sometimes, because people like to work with people they know work well,
Right.
And it's, trust me, it's a risk, especially when it comes to film. And we can discuss the larger things that I don't think it really should be as risky as it is, but I'm going to put that aside. I honestly believe filmmaking could be just as boring in terms of like opportunities as any other regular job. I think there's a world, but we live in a market economy. There are ways that we've set it up to make it pretend like it's. I think it's inflated, but we'll let me try not to get off track.
Yeah.
let me stay on the point that I'm trying to make, which is like you need people, and it's a highly collaborative. And part of the reason that the industry is so insular is that it's not because I've heard the term about like nepotism and all the stuff that happens, and it's all about your connections. It is, but it also isn't, right? Because what I mean by that is that the reason why it's so insular is that, again, people like to work with people they know will bring something very specific. And it's very hard sometimes to take a risk on someone you don't know, because especially when they disappoint you, especially at a very high level, it makes it hard for you to want to trust to work with them again, you know? And that's just a fact, which is why people keep going back to the same people, because they're like, at least I know what I'm going to get from them.
Right.
And they always bring it.
And there's so many open-ended like things along the way that is like, this could go wrong, this could go wrong. Well, let me make sure this is going to go right over here.
Exactly. So, you know, part of artistry is taking risks, but because we have turned, you know, a lot of aspects of this, you know, into, you know, a money-making thing, taking risks and ventures is a little bit harder, but risks are still being taken, because that's where you get the really interesting stuff. That's where you get the stuff that we enjoy watching, is when people actually take some really interesting risks. So
yeah. Well, for you specifically, and like, and you know, I guess similar to, you know, someone coming through the mentorship program of like, hey, I want to get this series regular role, and it's like, well, we got to do these other things along the way. For you, in, you know, teaching and in being a casting director and doing these other things, how do you choose, like, hey, this isn't exactly what I maybe want to be doing at this very moment, but I'm going to do a good job at it, and I'm going to learn along the way, and I know this is going to be a stepping stone to where I ultimately want to be going. How do you decide, like, this is going to work, as opposed to this is taking me off track?
That is, again, really good question. And I wish I had a straightforward answer to it, other than say that sometimes I don't know, and I figure it out when I figure it out. So it's humbling for me sometimes to be like, oh, I wasn't willing or brave enough to admit to myself that this might have been a waste of my time. But the fact is, the fact is, as long as there was that little bit of doubt in my head that it might not have been a waste of time, I know I might have hung on to that. So I'm glad that I just did it anyway and at least found out that it was quote unquote a waste of time. And then as a result, I find out it wasn't a waste of time. I realized, oh, okay, I get it. I clearly didn't feel ready enough. So that's why I'm doing this to distract myself.
Oh, wow. That's big.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
And so it's less about like, I wish there was it requires.
Man, how often, I just got to jump on that.
Yeah.
How often do we do things like that because we're like, oh, I just wasn't ready, or I wasn't up for that challenge. So then you make up these stories in your head.
Yes.
It's like, it's not me.
Right.
It was that.
Right. No, oh no, every single time. Like, so this is why, like I said, it's hard for me to answer that question because I don't know until I get to a certain point in whatever that journey is, whatever that job, and I go for myself, oh, okay, I think either I've spent, you feel it. You're like, okay, I've spent too much time here, and I need to move on and do something else. Or, you know, life will do that sometimes for you too, because of the feelings that you generate. You know, maybe the opportunities won't come the way that you think they're supposed to come, and either way, you learn. You're like, okay, well, what am I going to be doing with the time that I do have right now? You know, and so you know, to directly answer your question, it requires a level of self-awareness, a willingness to sit down. And here's the thing: is it's a new thing that I actually learned really just the other day. I used to think of myself as a really fearless person, and to a certain extent, I am. But what I started to realize is that I'm fearless in the way that other people, you know, would think that they're not, if that makes sense. Like, I'm a bit of a risk taker, right? But taking a risk is not my fear, right? My biggest fear is, in many ways, consistency. You know, that's one of my biggest fears. And what I mean by that is like,
the boring phase.
The boring phase.
Yeah.
I'm like everybody else, where I'm kind of like, I don't want to spend 10 years on this thing and then realize that it was a waste of my time, right? And the thing that I started realizing was I need to reframe some of that. And I need to stop anticipating. And also, here's the other thing too. I'm really good at taking, let me call them like adjacent risks. So even going into casting, like I knew I always had an eye for wanting to direct, produce, and create, right? And the thing was, it's hilarious how I say it's like, I don't know how long I'm actually going to stay in the casting game. I mean, I kind of feel like if an opportunity ever came along, it'd have to be like a really interesting project, you know, or because it's challenging for me. When I started realizing it was challenging for me to sit in rooms and be like, oh, I'm just helping someone else tell their story, but I'm interested in telling stories myself.
Yeah.
Right. And so once that feeling started to grow in me, it actually started to affect my work a little bit. And what I mean by that is that I still did my job, but it started feeling increasingly harder to do it. And then I was using all these other reasons to like stay in a place that I didn't necessarily want to be in, if that makes sense. So it's like, well, I got to do this for the money, which is not it's not a bad reason. It isn't, because, you know,
we all need money.
We all need money. I got a family, so it's a good reason. I don't want to disappoint friends. You know, I mean, that's also a really good reason because I care about people. You know, that kind of thing. But are those things enough to sustain you so you get up day to day and do those things? And if they're not, you got to be honest with yourself. I wanted to care more about the money, but I was like, but it's not worth my sanity. And I wanted to care more about my friends, but at the same time, I'm not responsible for them either, ultimately, if that makes sense. Like, they still get to make their own choices and they get to live their own lives. So those are not good reasons. Like, why am I in it? Like, what is my skin in the game for this, you know? And so that was my long roundabout way of saying, these are questions you have to ask yourself first before you jump in. And also be willing to have enough compassion for yourself to know that you might lie to yourself about the reason why you're doing the thing. And then when you figure out the truth, be honest enough to face it.
Wow. That is so powerful, man. And I know that I think a lot of people needed to hear that. Seriously. Like, I wanted to reiterate it, but instead I'm like, I'm not gonna say it better than you. So,
Oh, that's hilarious.
so if you want to hear it again, just rewind this. But so good, and so I mean, how about the question of like then how do you face it, and if it's something that like you're scared of or maybe don't want to see, like how are you overcoming it?
I think the best. I have to, I don't know. I'll do my best to like answer this question. I would say you kind of have to do this trick where you have to trust that on some level you ultimately follow the path that you're meant to follow, right? And so even in that moment, just being able to identify the fact that you are afraid is already a huge step. I mean, it really is. So as long as you're at least willing to do that, you can own anything else that comes after that, right? So if you go, you know what, I got to be honest with myself, like, it terrifies me to do this. Now, I'm one of these people who I'm like, now that you know that, are you willing to lean into that fear? Or are you willing to or if it's too much for you, are you going to step back? Because the truth is that I'm one of these people, I'm going to get a little bit metaphysical, but I'm like, life is going to life. And I'm really one of these people who honestly believes that all of us serve a purpose. And the challenge in that is, are you willing to work with that purpose, be in conversation with that purpose? Or are you going to fight it, right? Are you going to... There's this guy, he's a very interesting philosopher. His name is Bernardo Kastrup, who probably phrased it the best I can. He's an incredibly intelligent man. If you go onto YouTube, you cannot find a talk with him that's less than like 2 hours because he just has so much to say. He has like a degree in computer science and then also a degree in philosophy. And so he's just this really wild guy. And he said something once about how you have to realize that your life is not meant for you in the way that you think it is. And it's a very hard thing to hear, especially if you're in the West, because we're so hyper individualistic. But it's like, if you really think about this, like as a human being, it would be almost as if like an apple thought that the entire point of the tree was because of it. Right? That's really, what you need to understand is like the apple absolutely serves a role, and it will, there were a whole bunch of factors that went into making that apple, like that had nothing to do with the apple, by the way. You get what I'm saying? Like from how the tree had to grow up to then when the apple became the apple. And guess what? When that apple passes, it's going to start the next tree. That's kind of how we are as human beings. The entire point of everything, right, is not you. Okay, you're kind of like a passenger. You're kind of going through that. And so in a very metaphysical way, the point that I'm trying to make is that you have to sit with yourself long enough to figure out, what might my purpose be? And I don't mean that in like spend time thinking about it, but literally look at your life and go, what has your life been telling you? What has your life been telling you, from the feelings that you've been having to the experiences that you've been having? How have those things matched up? When was the last time you felt like in tune with the flow of life? The more you start paying attention to those moments and then, bending yourself to those moments, the easier things kind of become. And that's how I've been learning to deal with it. So I spent a lot of time, I used to worry a lot about things. And sometimes that worry would turn into anxiety, especially about the future, And when it dawned on me that a lot of things that I was worried about, 9 times out of 10, 2 things would happen, right? One, the thing that I was most worried about either just did not happen at all, which just showed that I wasted all that energy worrying about it, or guess what? It happened and I survived it.
It didn't happen the way that you thought it.
No, it did. No. I'm gonna double down. I'm saying it happened exactly the way that I thought it would.
Okay.
And I was still breathing.
Right.
So in other words, it didn't kill me. So the thing is I realized that the fear that I generated felt like it was going to kill me. But when I found out that it didn't actually kill me, I'm like, oh. So in other words, what was the point of all that anxiety then? What did it help? None. The other feelings I would have is like a lot of regret about things. And, should absolutely learn from your lessons and things like that. But I realized that there's different kind of regret. There's the regret that allows you to remember something well enough that you're like, okay, I prefer not to repeat that, especially if you hurt someone or you cause some kind of harm. No, you don't want to continually keep doing that. But there's a different kind of regret, the kind that makes the feelings are so attached to the thing. It's almost as if you feel so much about it that you're trying to change something that you cannot change. And those are that kind of regret is completely useless because you literally have all these emotions attached to an event or something that you cannot go back and fix. So what are you using that emotional energy for? And so, I guess as everyone keeps talking about these days, the thing that I'm learning is like doing my best to be as present as possible. I'm not always successful at it, but I do my best to be as present as possible day to day. And that's how I get through it.
Yeah. I want to, I really loved all of that. And I want to go back to the tree analogy and the apple.
Please. Yeah.
Because I really love that because I'm like, if you imagine that you are the apple on the tree, right? And in one, it might make you feel a certain way because you're like, oh, well, wait a second, right? I want to be the tree, right? Yeah. But like, yeah, so if you're the apple, and I'm so grateful that I've gotten into this service mentality within my life. And so that's just exactly what I thought. Like as the apple, right? You are serving the tree, the bigger picture. You're serving how the branch looks, that branch is successful.
Exactly.
Somebody will eventually grab the apple and be like, sweet, I have this apple. Right. You're serving that person. Right. And so you end up just serving. And so I just kind of was like, yeah, I think if you are confused at like, I'm out of flow with my purpose and what I'm doing, and that's what you're feeling, it's like, you're most likely not in that service mentality. And if you can get into that service mentality, then I think you'll begin to find your way into that flow.
100%. It's hilarious to me because again, let's continue the apple analogy. It's like, if you, like you said, you're the apple, but you think you should be the tree or whatever, the hilarious thing is that you will be the tree. It's just not now. So be the apple as the apple. I promise you, because your seed will eventually become a tree. So in other words, you will become the tree at some point. But the only way that's going to happen is if you allow yourself to just be the apple while you're the apple.
Yeah.
That's just the best way to kind of think about it for me. I mean, I know I don't want to break the metaphor too much, but it's really, I'm just getting down to this idea of it takes a level of self-knowledge, self-reflection, that a lot of people don't have time for and are not willing to do. And I understand why, because there are many things that pull away your attention from doing this. But the thing is, the more you allow yourself to sit with the moment, to figure out the easier it is to withstand a lot of the things that come at you in life that make it harder. It's weird because we try to put the cart before the horse. And I think it gets easier. I think it gets easier as you get older because you have a lot more data. You just experience a lot more. And then you get to see, okay, well, this stuff worked. This didn't. And now what am I willing to learn? And then, you have those three kind of things, to sort of look through. There's a bunch of stuff that was fed into you when you were younger, which you didn't have much choice on. But then you went through a certain age where you got to test out some of those things, right? To see whether or not they worked. Now you have quite a bit of data, And so now you decide for yourself, like, how much of that stuff do I want to keep? How much do I want to get rid of? And then what more are you willing to learn? So
Get Scene Studios was founded in helping connect actors with industry pros. We bring in the top Southeast agents and casting directors to really help you get seen by the people that matter. And we really focus this on two different ways, everyone. In one of our signature in-person classes or workshops called the Get Seen 360, you get to have a self-tape evaluated, then you get to work on the callback, and then you also work on a cold read. You spend 5 hours with an industry pro in the Get Seen 360. And then for our online class, and this signature workshop we have is called the Perfect Submission. And this mimics the Actors Access submission process, where you send in a headshot, a self-tape, and a demo reel or clip. And so this is an incredible way to really get feedback on what that submission is looking like. And so everyone, as a thank you for listening, every single month we're going to choose one winner, and you get to choose one of these classes. Any class that you want will be absolutely free, and this will be our way of saying thank you so much. So all you got to do is head to the pinned comment below, put in your name and email, and you will be entered to win. All you got to do is put in your email one time, and you will live there forever, which means if you submit this month, you could win 3 months from now, 4 months from now. So go ahead and head to that pinned comment now, and good luck. Yeah. You have also found yourself teaching and instructing, and you've done it with us, and it's been great because as like an industry pro, you're one of the few I feel like that like kind of has your own curriculum that does a bunch of different things, and I'm like, yeah, Bob, I just let Bajo free and just do your thing. But then you also teach at GSU. How has that really affected your creative journey? And
So one of working at Georgia State has been an incredible blessing for me. I got to connect with some really amazing people, and I've gotten some amazing opportunities. Mary Emily Deal, who's a fantastic, she's a good actor here in Atlanta, and also she's a professor at GSU, and Susan G. Reed, who is she's now a professor in the film department as well, but for the longest time worked as an agent, as a talent agent with AMT. And there are a bunch of other people at GSU that I'm forgetting to mention right now, but those two were key because they helped bring me into the program. I got to practice some teaching, which is probably one of the reasons why you said it's easier for me to like walk into a room and kind of have a curriculum, because that's part of a side job that I've learned to do. And that's what an MFA gives you, by the way, training in how to teach as well. So I've gotten to direct like full stage productions. In fact, just last fall, I did an adaptation of Much Ado About Nothing, but I set it in Nigeria in 1963, and I kind of adapted this play. And I don't know of anywhere else where I would have gotten an opportunity to do that. And I was honestly genuinely touched and surprised with how well it was received. Yeah. Because the students loved it. Members of my family and community were just like, that was so good. When is this going up again? Like, I mean, are we going to get to see this again? Like, I got to stretch a creative muscle that, had been, I kind of kept buried for a very long time. And so I basically wrote a full-length play, right? And it was a lot of work. I would not recommend doing it the way that I did it, but I learned so much from doing it, and it turned out really, really well. So,
hold on, I'm going to stop you real quick. So, how fulfilled were you after that?
It was. I felt good. I felt really. It's weird because you asked me the question. I want to answer a different question than you asked me, which is like, I really, in that moment, I was like, man, I'm glad this thing was done. And not only that, I saw what it seemed to do for other people, and I felt it feels good to just accomplish something, to do a thing.
Well, because I bring it up only because I'm like, if you think about and I only because I feel like this happens so often with the things that we want in life. I'm like, technically, what you want, your main goal is like tell a specific story.
Yes.
It maybe is on a different stage than you imagined it. But you did what you technically wanted to do.
Exactly.
So did you acknowledge that?
Jesse, that's a really good question. In some ways, I did. And not only that, no, actually, let me take that back. Internally, for me, I actually have, and I'm like, that was amazing. But if I want to be transparent with you, the thing that threw me off was that after everyone saw it, the next thing you asked is like, what's going to happen next with this thing? Where are you going to? And the thing, truthfully, my thing was like, and this is what sounds really terrible. I was like, if it didn't necessarily go anywhere else, like I got mostly what I wanted out of it. If I pushed further, it would have to be for some other creative reason. And so I'm willing to chop it out there if someone is actually interested in wanting to like put it back on and that kind of thing. But anything else that happens with it would just be gravy for me. Does that make sense? It would just be icing on top of the cake. The cake was the experience itself.
Yeah.
Like I proved to myself that I could write a play if I needed to, Again, not only that, the lesson I took from him is like, I want to do this again, but I also want to do it differently. Like I want to do it in different circumstances based on what I learned. And so that's the next thing that I'm trying to figure out. I was like, okay, there were things about this that I really liked. That's what I took out of the process. Once I saw what the process was, I was like, okay, here's what I liked about the process. I want to keep these things. And here's the other thing that here's what I want to do differently. And let me be very specific about what I'm talking about. In general, just learning more about the craft of crafting a story, being able to borrow from one of the greats, Shakespeare, to kind of help me out with the plot. So a lot of my work was done, right? But then also even learning dialogue, letting stuff come out of me, doing more research into my own culture. That was very interesting. It's stuff that I want to go back into doing. And also the use of AI, which I know can be very scary for some people. But, full disclosure and spoiler alert, ChatGPT will not write a play for you. Oh, just to be clear, it will never write a play for you. Yeah. Okay. It's not good enough yet. No, it's not good enough yet.
I had an idea and I was like, I'm gonna write a Lifetime movie. Right. And when I say I'm gonna write it, ChatGPT is gonna write it.
Right.
ChatGPT cannot write the Lifetime movie.
It cannot. Exactly.
Tried.
And this is what's hilarious. Like, because I know the way we're using the word Lifetime. It's like, of course. I mean, come on. Even that it can't even write a bad movie.
Right. No,
not
it can
a
give
bad.
Me the breakdown.
Exactly.
It breaks it down really nice.
Right.
It gives me a really good guide. Like this. I'm glad that you brought up AI because I love me some AI.
Yeah, same.
Everyone, you just have to understand that yes, some things are gonna change, right? And some jobs are gonna get taken. It is what it is.
Yes.
But if you look at it, it can allow you more creativity than you've ever experienced in your entire life. It can allow you to do things you've never been able to do, or like things that you were so scared of. I'll never be able to do that because I don't know how to do X, Y, Z. AI unlocks it for you so easily. And like, if you can look at it like that, then all of a sudden it becomes this incredible gift as opposed to this negative thing.
I couldn't have said it better, but I cannot resist adding the story that I read in a book somewhere. It's like everyone is so obsessed with how technology affects creativity, how it's used, and they never pay attention to the fact that every technology created is always a tool for the most part.
Yeah.
You still need the creator. Like people talk about like think about it. I mean, Spielberg. What did Spielberg shoot his first film and stuff on? Right? It was like it was a film camera, millimeter, like a 8mm or whatever, or 60mm. I'm not sure. The point that I'm trying to make is that, how do I put this? It's like, why is it that now that there's like even more technology, even like better, easier ways of you don't really hear a lot of people go, oh, he's the next Spielberg. Or they could say that, but the point I'm trying to make is that you can't replicate the person. Their viewpoint, their artistic thing. The point I'm trying to make is that there are a bunch of people that have gotten much better at like telling stories and doing all this kind of stuff. But what I'm saying is that why do we not have, like, proportionally speaking, a whole lot more Spielbergs just sprinkled out there? Because it's not about the technology. Like, we have a lot of like really good like storytellers, but what I'm saying is that there are a couple great filmmakers that we all point out and can see, and talk about all of them. There should be like, with the way people talk about technology, like it's going to come in and take over, from a proportional and like what's the word I'm looking for? Exponential perspective. If there was a tie between technology, and then what I mean is like if there was an actual like connection between, let me find a better way to say this. What I'm getting at is that if your fears about like, okay, well, everyone's just going to be a Spielberg today, I think you're fooling yourself. You get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like everyone is like, oh, because of the AI right now, it's like all of a sudden like everyone's going to be a Shonda Rhimes.
But do you want to know why? Because if Spielberg wasn't Spielberg, but Spielberg was coming in today,
yes,
he would be looking at all of the new technology,
right,
and using it in a way that no one else is using it.
Thank you very much for helping me make my point. That's what I'm trying to get at. That's really what I'm trying to say.
And so that's our responsibility. Instead of being scared, how can I use this to make me better? How can I use it to be more creative? How can I use this to just make And we don't even know what it is yet.
Exactly.
But like, what is the next thing?
Right.
Like there was a time when it was just radio.
Yes.
Right. And then film and TV were coming out. Like, you want to know how mad the radio people were?
I know.
Like, so I don't know what the next thing is, but like, we will be at the forefront of it. You know what I mean?
As long
like,
as you're
and
willing to
you can
embrace
make
it.
that choice
Yeah.
to be like, yes, I'm ready. I'm going to take it on, or I'm even going to create it. Like, you have the ability to be more creative than ever.
You know what? Let me tell an even better story because I really want to hammer this point. Because I think it's really important. Did anyone hear the story about the Sony photography contest? So there's this German photographer who tried to warn Sony and say, "Hey, you're not going to be able to tell the difference between whether an AI took a picture or like a person did it," and they didn't really listen to him. Okay? This is apocryphal, so like I read an article on it, and so I'm not going to tell exactly the way it is, but here's the gist of what happened.
Yeah.
So this man decides to enter into the contest, right? And he ends up winning, okay? And then after he wins the prize, he reveals to them, he says, by the way, I don't want your prize, but here's the thing. I did this using AI. And Sony was livid. They were, because the picture's apparently really good, and it looks
Right.
like, something. And then he tried to explain to them, was like, I warned you that you would not be able to tell, and you didn't believe me. And then I proved it. So they were a little pissed at that. But second, this is the other point that he tried to make. The prompts that he had to put into the AI to create that thing, the only reason he was able to do that was because he'd spent like 20, 30 years as a photographer, a professional photographer doing all this other
Yeah.
stuff. If you had given the same, undergrad who's just studying photography could not have created that picture with AI because they didn't have the experience
Right.
to use the tool the way that he did. And that's what people miss.
Yep.
So that's really the point.
You know what? And let's just take that down to like a pencil. You give me a pencil, it's a tool.
Right.
I can't draw for shit. It's going to be horrible. You give that pencil to an artist, it can, who knows what can happen.
Exactly.
And this is the exact same thing.
Right. Thank you for even simplifying that even more.
It's how are you going to use that tool?
Right. Yeah. So, yeah.
I love it. I love it. That definitely wasn't in the notes, but I'm glad we arrived there. So I do want to dive into some of your casting experience as well.
Yes.
And when you eventually took over Vampire Diaries, I'd love to know how that kind of changed your perspective on the film and TV industry, like essentially like not being in the background, just kind of like helping, like tell me what to do, and then taking over a department and seeing things a little bit closer.
It was an amazing experience for me because I learned a lot very quickly. And that's, I'm trying to think about what were some of the big takeaways for me. One of the big things that did happen for me is I began to understand what I brought to the table, if that makes sense. Like that became a bit more crystallized for me once I was in there making decisions. And there are two ways, both on a creative side and then also just on a, I don't even know how to describe it, but call it like a societal level or whatever. So Vampire Diaries, and I hope people don't mind me saying this, but I mean, come on, it's a pretty white show. I mean, it's a lot of, just happens to be a lot more Caucasian faces on it, right?
Yeah.
Shout out and credit to the WB. They definitely they talk the talk as far as like diversity and wanting really as much representation in front of the camera as possible, which is always important. And that's one thing that I always felt supported by the studio. Because I remember one of the roles that I tried to cast, they wanted a white male in the role, at least that's the way the writers did it. And the studio was like, absolutely not. It was like this role does not require a white male, so we need to show us anybody but a white male for this role. There's no reason why this has to be this way, and that was kind of the studio's perspective. So I thought that was really impressive. Like that impressed me because you don't necessarily feel that always from a corporate. But and
Right.
I think what is his name? Tony. I feel terrible now because I've forgotten Tony's last name, but he was the casting exec at the WB at the time. He was who I had that conversation with. And then, so what happened was Marty hired me. Then when she left and I took over, all of a sudden the person I hired to be my assistant happened to be a black woman. And then the person who got hired as the extras casting also became black. And so overnight, the entire like Atlanta casting department for the Vampire Diaries became African American, you know, and that was just a result of me getting hired. And I thought that was weird because I didn't do it on purpose. I just hired who I knew and who was in my network, and they just happened to be.
Right.
And they came in, and that's kind of what happened. So it was this kind of a weird thing that you know, strange thing that happened. You know, obviously we were just the Atlanta casting team. I don't ever want to take credit for the LA casting team, Leslie and Greg Orson. They're amazing, like really fantastic people as well. And so they were very committed to the idea of representation. Like they were so good at finding as many choices as possible for any kind of role. The second part for me was from a story perspective. And it wasn't specifically on Vampire Diaries, it was on another show. I remember they had something written in the script. And I'm not going to go into necessarily all the details, but essentially there was something written in the script that could have been potentially offensive. And I remember no one was really going to say anything about it. And so while we were in a meeting, I just brought it up. I was like, and I did it in the most diplomatic way possible. I just basically said, listen, I understand why you have this in the script. And I don't want you to be afraid of Black Twitter, but I do want you to be aware that if this comes out, you know, you might get some blowback. And if you're willing to withstand it, go ahead and put it in and see what happens. But I would suggest maybe making a different choice. And they were like, oh, we had no idea, you know, and, you know, they were willing to, it was a very, very minor, very small change for the most part, you know. And they made that change, you know, to their credit. They're like, yeah, of course not. That makes no sense. Like if we can tell the story the same way, we're not compromising the artistic integrity of the story. Of course, easy fix. Why would you just unnecessarily, you know, offend someone, you know, for just to prove a point, right? And I remember that happened with another show too, and I had a huge problem with it. And I don't necessarily want to take credit for this, but I do remember on this particular show, it was a joke that they made, and I was like, the thing that really got me about that show was that they had these series of people, because it was a gag. It was a gag that had, you know, a guy, you know, going on a date with like different women, and he had issues with all of them. And then one of them was because like she was like a workaholic mom, and another was like or like super business minded, and one was like a mom or something. Like, so there were all these reasons, you know, why he didn't want to date them. And then it got to like specifically a black woman, and the only reason he didn't want to date her was because she was black. And I was like, this is not a funny joke.
No.
It's like it's not even close to being a funny joke. I was like, I kind of expected better, you know.
Right.
And so the joke was taken out. And again, I want to be very clear. I don't think it was necessarily because of me. I hope someone else besides me caught that. But I felt that strongly about it. I was like, please take out that joke. So that was one of those things when I thought to myself, you know, maybe I'm here for a reason. And so that's some of the things that I learned, because I think about those moments. It's like, you know, if I wasn't there, one, would someone have said something? Or two, my hope is that they would have. But the point is that I happen to be the one there.
I was going to say, but you were the one that did it. So, we don't know. I mean, maybe nobody would have.
I like to think somebody would have, because, you know, in the same way that I'm sure there are plenty of stuff that went over my radar that I missed that probably made it in that I'm sure a lot of people found offensive. So.
So you said that happened a couple of times. I could see that kind of fulfilling you, like, oh yeah, like I'm making a difference. Like I'm helping mold this story for the better. Yeah. It might not be your story, but you're at least molding a story to be taken better, and you know, and man, does it go back to the apple?
I know, right? You know, it always goes back. Like, listen, that thing is always on my mind. Like, especially days where I'm feeling kind of like, oh, I hate this. I know. I literally have to go back and think, okay, what's happening here? Is this an apple tree situation going on? Like, literally, I stopped there. I'm like, what am I actually supposed to be doing here? And so instead of fighting the thing, sometimes it allows me to let something go. It's like, maybe today this is what you're meant to be doing, and be okay with that.
Yeah. So I want to bring up the two different scenarios that you've talked about with us. So you have one, the show that you wrote, directed at GSU, and then you have what maybe seems like a smaller thing of like, hey, this isn't a good joke, or hey, if you tell this story, I think people are going to be offended. One we can argue is a smaller thing, but maybe way larger impact because more people are seeing it. But the other one is like more creatively you, right? And a much larger undertaking. Which one fulfills you best?
Oh, easily the second one.
Okay.
What are you talking about? Yeah.
So it's less about impact and more about your creative.
Let me tell you something.
Yeah.
Here's the thing about, I care about quality of impact, not quantity. Okay. And the thing is like, we live in a world where I understand why we do this, where the only people who get stories told about them are like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or, all these people that do like these big, massive, incredible things. And I think that's great. But there's just as much dignity and nobility in being a father who wakes up every day and makes sure that your kid has everything they need so they can be a successful, wonderful, amazing, like, human being. Like, to me, in many ways, it's just as impactful, if not more, because you have much more limited control over what you can do in those kinds of things. Like, being a positive impact on one single individual, right, can be just as big, if not more, than trying to think that you're going to change the whole world. One of them requires a massive ego. That's the first thing. But on top of that, it's also beyond your control. And it takes an incredible amount of effort, right? This other one you can actually do. And not only that, like, it's a greater chance of success that the world will actually be a better place when you're kinder to the people that are like within your circle. Like that has a greater impact because you know what? That stuff multiplies.
Exactly. Yeah.
It really does. And so the thing that touched me the most, and I'm kind of tearing up a little bit, was like there was a student, and I know how they meant it, and I tried my best to like be gracious in accepting it, but they literally said, "Oh my God!" Like they were like, Professor Sonubi is like, this play has changed people's lives, and I was like, and I understood. Like I had to, I was like, well, you guys are young, trust me, there's going to be more stuff that's going to happen, but I had to sit with the impact of what she was explaining at that moment. Is that these kids had never had an experience like this before. And because of this play, this endeavor that we did together, they got to do something that they've never done before. They got introduced to Nigerian and Yoruba culture. They got to play. They got to have fun. I mean, they put on a play. For some of them, it was the first time they'd ever done anything like this. And I'm like, that's amazing. Like, I'm glad that I got to be part of that process, And the thing is like, and they gave me that feedback, and I saw it. I don't know what my comments did to those people. Like I didn't get to see it. I mean, I hope it had a positive impact, and I hope But that thing I'll never know, And the thing is like that's great, and I hope it does. But this one, I feel like I actually had a direct influence over, and then I also got feedback from it, which is nice, and that's a bit more fulfilling. That makes a lot more sense to me.
And I think that is just so valuable what you said, and it really circles back, right? If I talk about like our mentorship and the normal goal that comes through or whatever is like, what is it that you actually want? What is it that you're actually wanting to go achieve? Is it this impact? Is it real? Is it this financial success? Like what is it? And I think we put it in this package of series regular or successful actor, but what actually is it? And get a better view of it, because I think your tactics and strategy at achieving it will change.
You're asking people to do a tough thing, which is acknowledge their desires in the most truthful way possible. There's this guy who wrote this book called Wanting. I read so much of this stuff, and then I feel bad. I need to do a better job of remembering the names of the authors and things like that. But he, what is this guy's name? It's technically like a business book, but it's called Wanting. And his book is based off of the philosophy of this French philosopher named René Girard, who basically describes us as what we call mimetic creatures, meaning that we learn through copying. Like the reason we're so successful as a species, is that a child learns a language, right? Not because like it's taught, it's just literally imitating its parents, and then eventually it starts doing its thing. I'm going to do my best to like make this very condensed, but essentially, with the book Wanting, it forces you to talk about why do you think you want what you want? Because that's what human beings are actually really terrible at. Because we've put ourselves in a very strange situation in modern society where our desires are no longer tied to our need for survival anymore, which means we've put ourselves in it's kind of an epistemological nightmare. I mean, like philosophically speaking, what I mean is that before, like you ate food because you were hungry, and so your want and your need were both tied. They were the same thing. Now we don't eat because we're hungry. We eat because we want to.
Right.
We don't have to.
Bored.
Because I'm bored. Exactly.
Because entertainment.
Entertainment. Like, yeah. There's so many other reasons that you. And the thing is, like, the sad thing is that before we were tied to our instincts were tied to nature. They were tied to, so our needs and desires were kind of one and the same. Once we got rid of all the danger and all the things that were tied to survival, but we're not very good at knowing what to want. And the only way we know is like we're just using the coping skills that we did, which is you learn to survive by watching. So now we're learning what to want by watching other people. And the sad thing is that sometimes we watch the wrong people.
Right.
Right. So your desires sometimes are like, you say you want a Lamborghini, right? And the thing is like what you realized, and that's the key of what you were talking about when you say, I want to see you as regular. Why do you want that? Is what you're actually saying is like, well, I want people to think I'm successful. Well, guess what? Maybe a Lamborghini is not your version of successful. In fact, it might be the worst version for you because you buy the Lamborghini, you can't even afford it. You can't afford the upkeep on it, that kind of thing. So things like you didn't actually want the Lamborghini. You wanted the stuff that came with the Lamborghini.
Right.
But that's not your version of it. That may be that guy's. He can probably afford it. You can't. So what is your version of the Lamborghini? Spend time thinking about that so you don't waste time on a Lamborghini when honestly, a Peugeot would make you happy. It would give you the same thing because the respect that you're looking for, you get it as being like a teacher, or you get it as a bread maker. I'm trying to think of like the things that you want. It's like if you can get that thing from doing something that actually makes sense in your life, then do that.
Yes. Yeah. Bajo, we could just be here until next Monday or whatever.
I feel terrible.
No, you should feel so good.
Because I know we didn't even talk about the industry. I'm so sorry.
I don't know if we did one question.
I'm not so sorry. But we might have to redo this. I'm so sorry.
That just means that you're coming back and we'll do those questions.
I was like, I don't think I helped anybody.
No, you were so good. But this is what we'll keep to the script here, which is the spotlight sign-off, baby.
Okay.
5 questions to end strong.
Okay.
The first question is, what is something you are incredibly grateful for today?
Ooh, honestly, hey, first, I'm really grateful that my wife was able to drop my son off at school today because I was supposed to do it just so I could make it to this podcast. So it's a very simple thing, but I'm
You know what? I mean, you talked about working on being present. I mean, you can't be more present than that of like what's something you're grateful for today. And it can be something as simple as that. And I love that.
It really is. So I'm grateful for that. Yeah.
What's a film, show, book, or event that completely changed the trajectory of your life?
Change the trajectory? I read the question and I was like, I didn't spend time thinking about it. Because I felt bad. I'm sorry. I'll try and mention 2. The first one was this book called it was actually a play called The Incorruptible Judge that I read in Nigeria. I think it was one of the first times I got the idea that I wanted to be a lawyer. But then when I think deeply about it, I was like, that was a play. Maybe I wanted to be an actor, and I just missed
Oh man,
that.
yeah.
Maybe I missed that. I missed the point of like being introduced to that thing. But the second one, because it's been on my mind like recently. One of the most fantastic shows I think ever made is called The Good Place by Michael Schur, and it's starring Ted Danson and Kristen Bell. When I say it changed my life, like it's like I watched that and I was like, I would love to do a version of that show, but introduce some like African metaphysics in the same way. Because that show is so good, incredibly funny, but somehow most people don't realize it, but the diet of philosophy that you get thrown at every time you watch that show is ridiculous. People don't realize that they're basically being taught philosophy with every single episode.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Third question is, what's something in your daily routine that you really cherish?
Meditation and working out. Those are things that they're so important now that I do my best to try and keep as much consistency doing that as I can. The days when I don't, I feel it. And so, that's those two things.
Nice. And what's something you're currently working on, trying to improve in your life? Not trying, actually improving.
Actually doing, yeah. It's I've already kind of talked about it. Is figuring out the consistency and applying that to the things that feed me, right? And so it's kind of a broad thing, but I'm looking for concrete ways for that consistency to be expressed. So like you saying that, okay, for this time, I'm definitely going to meditate. This time this is going to be creative hour. This time I'm going to, go work out. This time I'm going to practice self-compassion, to myself. It's just like, what are the things I want more of in my life? And how do I keep doing those things so I see more of those things in my life? I'm wanting to cultivate what I want to see more of in the world,
That's
within
super
myself,
powerful.
what I want to see more in the world. Yeah.
I love that. Last question, Bajo.
Boy.
If there was one piece of advice that you want all the listeners to get based on your life, what would it be?
Oh man. If you're able to find the courage to sit with yourself, work on making peace with your demons so the world doesn't have to deal with it.
Wow.
That's the thing that I can be vigilant about that. Like, have compassion for yourself as you're doing it. But yeah, just if there's things in the world that you see are wrong, I promise you it's a bit of a reflection of what's going on internally for you. So literally, like, fight your demons so other people don't have to fight them.
I love that, because that really just reveals a bit that like how often are the things that we don't like, or arguments or debates or things that it's like, is that just you not quite dealing with the things that's going on? I love that.
I found that to be the case, and it's not. I use the word fight, but what I really mean is make peace. Because I don't know if you want to be in a constant state of fighting, but what I mean is, all of us. I'm a big Jungian. Carl Jung is like you asked me about reading stuff that changed my life. Carl Jung, oh my God, yeah. Like, I've read a couple of his books, and then another book that was called The Red Book recently. It was just him scribbling a lot of stuff that was going on internally for him. But I've found a lot of the challenges that I see in life is sometimes a refusal to acknowledge what's going on within me first. And sometimes I surprise myself. And you'd be surprised how much you lie to yourself sometimes. And so you have to often confront that aspect of yourself. And be okay with laughing at yourself sometimes when you realize, I know I probably shouldn't. Instead of beating yourself up, just laugh at, I was being a dope. Because guess what? that's what every human being is actually doing, whether
Right.
they're aware of it or not. Well,
Yep.
just being dope sometimes, and sometimes we take ourselves a little too seriously. So.
Well, I know one thing for sure, Bajo. This episode was dope.
Well, I can say here's what I know. This was more fun than I thought it would be, and I'm glad that we got to have this conversation. And I do genuinely, I'm like, oh God, this had nothing to do with the industry.
No, it's so, you know what? No, you know what? This is, you know what? I'm gonna call you out right now.
What's that?
I'm gonna call you out right now.
What's that?
You're not giving yourself credit,
Okay.
and I'm sure you don't give yourself credit so often in life. And so, I mean, we talked about life shit,
Yes.
and it doesn't matter if you're an actor, a filmmaker, you're living this thing called life.
That's fair.
And so
That's fair.
it absolutely helped people. I know it did.
Okay. I'll take that. No, thank you. Yeah. Well, it helped me, So I'm saying stuff out loud that I need to hear more of myself. So
I love it. I love it. Well,
cool.
Bajo, thank you so much. It
Thank
was so
you,
fun,
Jesse.
man.
This was great. This was great. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome.
man.
Thank you so much for tuning in. It was a blast today. Let us know how much you enjoyed this episode. If you haven't subscribed, please do. It really does help the podcast grow in a big way, and we want to be able to impact more artists just like you. So thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one.